Masech Nedarim Daf Nun Aleph. We begin with several funny stories, and then we go back to the Mishnayot about vows and different types of foods. So the story goes: Rabbi Avad Hidula LeRabbi Shimon BeRabbi. Rabbi, that's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, made a wedding celebration for his son Rabbi Shimon. כתב על בית גננה 24,000 ריבועים דינרים נפקו על בית גננה דן ולה הזמנה לבר kapara. Someone, obviously it was Bar Kapara himself, who was a sage student, colleague of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and he painted graffiti on the wedding canopy, and he wrote, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi spent 24,000 times 10,000 dinar. This would be equivalent to maybe $20-30 million in today's dollars on this wedding, and yet he failed to invite Bar Kapara to the wedding. This is what he scrawled all over the wedding canopy. All right, that's a good way to get your message across, that you want to be invited. There are more subtle ways also. Why did Rabbi not invite Kapara? Will be clear in a moment. You'll see Bar Kapara was somewhat of a jokester, and sometimes caused some embarrassment to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Anyway, after he did this, Amar le, im le'obre resono, kach le'ose resono al achad v'chama. And Bar Kapara added and said to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi himself, if God does this for those who do his will, those who violate his will, all the more so. Or other way around. If for those who violate his will, God gives such and such, in other words, you, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who violate God's will, and yet look how rich you are, those who actually follow God's will, how much richer and wealthier and more reward will they get? What did Rabbi Yehuda Nasi do wrong that he's called Ovrei Retzono? Well, I guess by not inviting Bar Kapara, this goes against God's will, apparently, according to Bar Kapara. Anyway, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi got the point, and there was enough pressure. He said, okay, I'll just invite him. Otherwise, he's going to keep spraying graffiti and sending me these threatening messages. Easier just to keep him closer and invite him. So, Azmine, Amar lo seresono ba'olam hazeh kach, lo'olam haba lachad kama v'chama. So we invited him, and then Bar Kapara changed his tune and said, to those who do God's will in this world, all the more so how much good they get in the next world. In other words, now, see Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, you do God's will, and look how rich you are in this world, and you're going to get even more in the next world. So he turned his curse into a blessing. Okay, Yoma de mechayech be'Rabbi atya puranuta le'alma. Here was the problem with Bar Kapara. He was a funny guy, and he would make Rabbi Yehuda Nasi laugh. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, very distinguished, honored person, who was very serious. I mean, he had to meet with the Romans and all that. And so usually he was in a serious mood. And Bar Kapara would come and make him laugh. The problem with that is that then calamity would come into the world. The idea is that Bar Kapara, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi rather, through his seriousness and suffering, brought atonement to the world, because he represents the whole community. Whereas his levity, then we will not have that atonement, and then punishment will come to the world. So it's important that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi be very serious, kind of the equivalent today of you want a president or a general of the army not to spend a lot of time playing golf all the time, right? You want him to be serious, taking his job. The attack at Pearl Harbor, incidentally, happened because the general who was in charge of Pearl Harbor was out playing golf, literally, and did not see the warning signs, which there were. So, okay, having levity, laughing, joking around will distract him, and that will bring calamity to the world. So that's why Amar leBar Kapara la tebadichan v'yavena lach arba'in geriveh hiter. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is like, all right, you could come, but you better not make me laugh. And if you don't make me laugh, I'll reward you with 40 se'ah of wheat. All right? Just come and be serious. Don't make me laugh. Now, it's obvious what he's going to do. Amar le lichazi mor techol geriva de ba'ena shakilna. Bar Kapara said, don't worry about it. I agree to the terms, and you'll see I'll be able to take any se'ah I wish to take. In other words, as much as I wish to take, I'm going to be so serious and not make you laugh that I will win that award and get these arba'in, these 40 se'ah of wheat. And, don't worry about it. Okay, so what did Bar Kapara do? Shekal di kulada ba chafyeh kufra uschafe al reshe v'azal v'amar le lechil li mor arba'in geriveh chite derashena bach. So Bar Kapara took a giant basket. He's coming to collect his wheat with a giant basket, and he wants to make sure he doesn't lose any, and so he smears it with tar so none of the grains will fall through the holes of the basket, and then he brought it on his head, apparently overturned like a lampshade or like a mask covering his head. And he walks in with this giant basket overturned on top of his head and says, okay, I'm ready. You can measure out for me the 40 se'ah of wheat that you owe me because I didn't make you laugh. When Rabbi saw this, Achuch Rabbi, of course, he laughed, right? Because it's pretty funny. So what was so funny? Well, he has a basket overhead, so it's a bit of slapstick comedy. It's also funny because the idea is he's putting this thing over his head like a mask, so that usually to make someone laugh, you're going to kind of smile. So he's kind of hiding his face. It's like, look, I'm not making you laugh. I'm hiding my face. You can't even see my face, right? So this is your fault that you're laughing. I didn't even do anything. I just came with a big basket to collect my reward. I didn't tell a joke. I didn't even say anything. Okay. Anyway, Rabbi does laugh. Amar le lav azhartach de la tebadchan. Rabbi said, I told you, I warned you, don't make me laugh. Why'd you do that and make me laugh? Amar le chite derashena kana sebna. He says, no, I'm here to take from you the wheat that I am owed by you. What does he mean by that? Either that maybe he's referring to some other incident. You happen to owe me wheat from something else, or he's saying, sorry, I didn't do anything purposely to make you laugh. I'm just carrying my basket. Happens to be on my head. Happens to be a funny way, but I didn't tell a joke. I didn't do anything funny. I didn't even smile at you. I have a cover on. So therefore, you owe me the wheat. And so he turned out to be right. He said, see, Rabbi, you're going to give me all the wheat that I choose. All right. Now, the wedding is coming up, and Bar Kapara is going to come to the wedding. So Bar Kapara said to the daughter of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Lemachar shatena chamra b'rikuda de'abuch u'bekir kaneh de'imach. And he told the daughter, this daughter is already married, but is going to be at the wedding, obviously, because her brother is the groom. And he says, listen, tomorrow I am coming to the wedding, and I'm going to drink wine while your father is dancing and your mother is singing. Okay, this is very strange, right? Because I imagine that Rabbi was a pretty serious person and wasn't used to dancing, and certainly his wife wasn't used to singing. Now, we're not actually going to see the singing come up, but rather we're going to see her pouring wine for Bar Kapara. So maybe this means something like pouring wine. But Rabbi is going to dance a lot for Bar Kapara. So anyway, he predicts, he has this whole plan. Now, Ben El Asa Chataned Rabbi Hava. There's a man named Ben El Asa. He is married to Rabbi's daughter, probably the same one that he was just talking to. And he was very rich. Vashir Gadol Hava. As Meneh Lebe Hidulad Rabbi Shimon Be Rabbi. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi invited him, obviously, because he's a son-in-law and his daughter. Okay, so now they're all at the wedding, and let's see what happens. Amar le Bar Kapara Rabbi, my to'eva. In the middle of the wedding, right? They're enjoying, and maybe they're saying some divrei Torah or words of praise, toast to the bride and the groom. And so Bar Kapara says to the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, what does to'eva mean? To'eva, usually translated abomination, described in the Torah regarding Mishkav Zachur. So what does this mean? Now, is this an appropriate question at a wedding? I imagine not, and everybody was kind of feeling uncomfortable. Why you bring this up now? We're enjoying a nice wedding here. But anyway, Kol damar le'Rabbi dehachen hu to'eva pircha bar kapara. And so the bee had a lot of answers, but every answer, the explanation that he gave for the word to'eva, bar kapara, rejected it. That's not the right answer. Amarle parsheat. So the bee says, he's now his curiosity is aroused, and he says, "Okay, bar kapara, you tell me what it means." Amarle teti de betri tirmi li natla tat ramya le. So bar kapara said, "Let your wife come and pour some wine for me, and then I'll tell you." She came and she poured wine for me. Amarle de bi kum de kodli de emalach. And now you, Rabbi Yehuda, you have to stand up and dance in front of me, and then I'll tell you. So Rabbi Yehuda, he was so curious and wanted to learn this Torah, and so he got up and danced. And so you see, this was fulfilled, what he said the day before to his daughter, that your parents are going to dance and, sing. I don't know if she was singing, but maybe she was, some say she was ululating during the dancing, like women do at in parties when everybody's dancing. Okay. Hachi amar rachamana to'eva to'e ata ba. As here what it means, the word to'eva is a concatenation of 3 words. To'eh, you are straying after it. Meaning, this is not the typical marriage of a man and woman, but this is straying from, deviating from the ideal. And so, okay, he explained that. Now, lechasa achrina amar le. Now they have another cup of wine, another round of drinks. My tebel bar kapara goes to the word tebel. Tebel is said regarding bestiality. This is tebel. It means perversion. So same thing happened as before. The Yehuda Nasi said many answers, but Bar Kapara rejected them all. Avad. And so Bar Kapara says, do what I tell you. In other words, go and dance again, and then I'll tell you. Amarle tebel hu tebalin yeshba mi shanya hada bi'a min kulehon biot. He says tebel from the language of spices, right? Is there spice in this? How is this type of engagement different from other intercourse? Like, why would anyone want to even commit bestiality? What benefit, what pleasure is there in this more than anything else? It makes no sense. There's no taste in it. There's no spices in it. That's what it means, tebel. Okay. Amarle umay zima. Now they're on a roll. What does the word zima mean? Lewdness. Regarding several encounters like zinut, someone who out of wedlock is with someone, and perhaps has a child. Amarle ibid ki inyana kadma. Same story as before. Rabbi presented answers, and he didn't. Bar Kapara rejected them, and then he says, "Okay, do another dance." Avad v'amarle zo mahiz. The word zima is also a concatenation of 3 words. This, what is it? This meaning this child that was produced from an illicit or extramarital engagement. Well, what is this child? Who's the father? What's going on with this child? Right? It's unknown, and that's what zima produces. It's going to produce unknown children without parents. La yachel ben elasa lemispal. Okay, after all this, ben elasa could not tolerate what was going on. Kamun faku ve'intete mitaman. So that's why he was introduced before, because he's at the wedding, and what a humiliating thing. We're trying to enjoy a nice, beautiful wedding, the misameh hatan ve'kala, and he's bringing up all these terrible prohibitions about arayot. Right? What's going on? It's not appropriate for a wedding. Okay, maybe he would answer that this is appropriate for it. We wanna enjoy and celebrate this beautiful wedding, right? Which is permitted the right way, kosher wedding, right? This is the ideal, and this is contrasts with the other relations that are prohibited in the Torah. Maybe that's why he's bringing it up, to celebrate traditional marriage. Okay, anyway, they were fed up and they left. My Ben Elasa. Who is this guy anyway, Ben Elasa? He was so rich. What do we know about him? Titania, lo lechinam pizer Ben Elasa et ma'otav ela leharot behen tisporet shel kohen gadol. Oh, he used his money in order to get a haircut just like the kohen gadol got. Right? This is a very fancy haircut and very hard to do. So he spent a lot of money on it. But this was a positive thing. That way he could show people what a haircut like this looked like. Remember, they're living already 130 years after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. There's no Kohanim Gedolim, and people will forget what this haircut looked like. So he wanted to go out of his way and get a haircut like that to show people. Dichtiv kasom yichsemu et rashehem, pasuk in Yechezkel, they shall pull their heads about Kohanim. It's a question whether this haircut applies to all Kohanim or only Kohen Gadol. Anyway, here it just says Kohen Gadol. Tana ka'en lul yanit. It looked like a lul yanit haircut. This word lul yanit comes from Julian, the emperor. So this was a fancy haircut that emperors and important Romans would have. And so the Kohen Gadol, he has to also look important. So he had a haircut that was appropriate for his dignity. Now, what is this? My lul yanit, amar Rav Yehuda, tisparta yechidata. It's a unique haircut. All right. Hechidami. So how is it unique? Amar Rava rosho shel zeh besad ikaro shel zeh v'hanu tisporet shel kohen gadol. The locket of one bunch of hair goes up to the roots of the next bunch of hair, but don't overlap. It seems like it's some kind of short haircut with small braids, maybe something like a carpet might look like. You could look at some pictures of Emperor Julian or other types of fancy Roman haircuts and probably looked something like that, although it's hard to tell exactly what it was. All right, that's the end of the stories. And now we go back to the Mishnah that says, if someone says this cooked food is prohibited for me, that's only referring to soft food that you eat with an egg, eat with bread rather. But if it's talking about this type of egg or this type of gourd, these are solid foods. So we talked about the egg already. Now this gourd, what kind of gourd is it? Karkuzai. It's a gourd that grows in karkuza. And it's very hard. It doesn't cook very well, so it doesn't get mushy, and that's why it's considered a hard food, not a tavshil. Rav Ashi amar delat timuna beremetz. Another opinion of Ashi says it's a gourd. It's not the species of gourd, but rather that it's insulated in embers, and I guess cooked for a long time in these hot embers, and so it's actually the way it's cooked, not the type of gourd it is. Now we have a challenge to Rav Ashi, who says it's not the type of gourd, but the way it's cooked. It's from this Baraita. It says, Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Delat Aramit, he Delat Hamistit. First of all, the Aramean gourd is the same as the Egyptian gourd. Okay. Kilayim im hayevanit, kilayim im haremusa. And both of these, which are the same thing, you cannot plant them together with Greek gourds because they are different species. And so that would be kilayim. And also you cannot plant it with a remutza gourd, because that would be kilayim. What do you see from here? That remutza is not the way it's prepared in warm coals, but rather is a species. So this proves Shemuel, it's the karkuza gourd, and that's why it's a different species altogether. You cannot plant it with the Egyptian species, and that is a challenge to Rav Ashi tiyufta. Next Mishnah. Okay, this Mishnah actually we saw already, where this Mishnah was already quoted at the beginning of the chapter. It's repeated here. So there's some kind of copyist error that the Mishnah is included twice. You have to remember that in some manuscripts, the Mishnah does not appear at the beginning of the chapter, but it's just the Gemara. Or in other manuscripts, it's only at the beginning of the chapter, the whole Mishnah, and then of each Perek. And so what happened here is that there's some combination where this Mishnah was quoted at the beginning, but there's also a quote of it at the end. We already saw this happened already in this Perek. Another part of the Mishnah was double quoted. This one also is double quoted. All right, anyway, it's good to review what it means. Someone says, I'm not going to have anything in a kedera. Kedera means, here they translate dish, but it means a pot. Any regular pot, something that's cooked in a pot, is only en asur el mimaseh retacha. That means just if it's boiled in a pot. Because that's usually what you do in a pot, is you boil the food. If he says, but if he said, prohibited to me is anything that enters a pot that I will not taste, then he's prohibited from anything that is made in a pot in any other way. So you don't always boil things in a pot like a soup. Sometimes you just roast things, pan roast or fry or other things that you do in a pot. But the typical use of a pot is a boil like a soup. All right, Tanya. Hanoder min hayored laktera asur bayored la ilpas. And so now we have a new term, ilpas. This is actually an ilpas from ancient times. This would be a pot that is used not mainly for cooking for the first time, but rather for recooking, reheating, or cooking for a long time. Like you would cook in a regular pot, and then you wanted to get a little extra cook and simmer for a while. That you put in this type of pot. This ilpas. Okay, so someone who says, I'm not going to eat anything that goes into a regular pot, asur biored la ilpas, he cannot have anything that goes into an ilpas either. Why? Because if it's in the ilpas, that means you already cooked it in the regular pot and then put it in the ilpas. So, and hayored lekidera, that's the expansive term, right? That's konam hayored lekidera. Anything that goes in the pot, no matter how it's prepared, is going to be prohibited. And therefore, since it was in a pot and cooked there, even though later you put it in ilpas, it's still prohibited. However, if in the vow he only said, I am prohibited from anything that goes into an ilpas, then he is allowed to eat something that goes into a pot, because some things you put in a pot and you never put into an ilpas. And so it would not exclude it would not include things that are just in a kedera, that are not an ilpas. Only if it actually went into an ilpas, that would be prohibited. Mina nasa bekedera mutar benasa beilpas. Mina nasa beilpas mutar benasa bekedera. If he uses the stricter formula, not hayored, but rather maaseh, so naasa bekedera, that means a dish that's normally that's cooked in the normal way in a pot, meaning just boiled like a soup, then it's permitted to eat something that was made in an ilpas, because you don't usually put in a ilpas those things. And the other way also, if you say that which is made in ilpas, then you are permitted for that which is made in a normal way in a kedera. Because what you make in an ilpas is going to be specific, that you cook it and put it in an ilpas, but most things you don't, and so then you could eat something that was just put in a kedera. All right, hanoder min hayored la tanur en asur ela bepat. If I say anything that goes into an oven, well, what typically goes into an oven is bread. So what I mean there is bread, not other things that you might happen to put in an oven. V'imamar kol ma'aseh tanur alai asur bekol hanasim betanur. But if he says a more expansive formula, anything that's made in an oven, then anything that he puts in the oven would be prohibited. Okay, you see this language, it looks like it should be switched around. That ma'aseh tanur, that sounds like it would be the typical way, which is bread, whereas yored letanur would be anything that goes into the oven. And there are in fact some that switch these two clauses around. Next Mishnah, mina kavush and asur ela mina kavush shel yadak. Says something pickled is prohibited to me, then that only applies to vegetables, because that's the typical thing that you pickle, vegetables. Kavush shani toem asur b'chol kivushim. But if he says a more expansive formula, pickled food I will not eat, so then that refers to anything pickled, even if he pickles fish or meat, anything. Mina shaluk. Shaluk means, again, there's different definitions of it, but it means some kind of pot roasted, right? It's in a pot, but not boiled with a lot of water, just kind of roasted with some gravy. Mina shaluk eno asur ela mina shaluk shel basar. Typically, that means pot roasted meat, and so it would only include that. But if he says shaluk shani to'em, more expansive formula, any tasting of anything that's pot roasted, asur bechol shilukim, that would prohibit anything that is pot roasted in that way. Gemara, Amar le Rav Acha bered Rav Avia le Rav Asher. Amar dichvish mai, dishlik mai, disli mai, dimaliach mai, hechin mashma tiba. Question to Rav Asher is, what if you use these passive formulas? That which is pickled, that which is pot roasted, that which is fire roasted, that which is salted. Is that the in expansive formula or limited formula? We don't know. We leave it unresolved. Remember, tiba'e in Masechet Nedarim is the same as teko and most other masechtot. Another Mishnah, min hasali en asur ela min hasali shel basar. When you say barbecued, then you typically mean meat. That's usually what you're going to barbecue. But if you use more expansive formula, barbecue, that I will taste, by adding that word, minasli is from that which is barbecued, is more limited. Anything I taste that is barbecued, then that will include other things. Sometimes you barbecue pineapple. It's delicious. Or onions. Min hamaliach en asur ela min hamaliach shel dag. If you say that which is from that which is salted, I prohibit myself. That only includes salted fish. That's usually what you salt. Maliach shanit, like maybe smoked salmon and things like that, very salty. They put that to put salt to preserve it. Maliach shani to'em asur bechol hameluchim. Whereas if he says anything salted that I will taste, then anything that's salted would be prohibited. Dag dagim shani to'em. If someone says fishes that I will eat. Some say he says both of these words, dag dagim, but more likely it means either dag or dagim. Either way, if he says any fish or fishes that I will eat, and he prohibits himself, asur behen ben begedolim ben ketanim, that prohibits both big fish and small little sardines, ben meluchim ben tefelim, whether they're salted or not salted, ben chayim ben mevushalim, chayim doesn't mean live, but rather raw or cooked, mutar betarit ubterufa ubesir. So all these are prohibited, all these types of fish and ways that they are prepared, but he is permitted to have minced sardines and to have fish brine. That's minced, and besir is fish brine, because that's not included in the word fish. That's just like, juice and bits and pieces. He doesn't mean that. That's permitted. Hanoder min hasachna. Someone says, I'm not going to have a sachana. This is some kind of dish of whole and chopped fish together. Then asur betarich tarit terufa. Then he cannot have not whole fish and not even minced sardines. Umotar besir ubemorias. But he can have the brine and fish gravy, because that's not included in that term. Hanoder mi tarit terufa. If he says, I'm not going to have tarit terufa, I'm not going to have minced sardines, then asur besir ubemorias, then he cannot have the fish brine and gravy either, because the fish brine and gravy have little pieces of sardines in them, and therefore that would violate the minced sardines statement. All right, now more about fish. Tanya, Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar omer, dag shani to'em asu begedolim umutar beketanim. The word dag, he says, refers to large fish, and so then he would only be prohibited from large fish, but can still eat small fish. But if he says daga shani to'em asu beketanim umutar begedolim, then he'll be prohibited from small ones, but permitted from big ones. Like in English, if you say fishy, right? Look at the fishies. That's usually talking about small ones. So the daga, the extra hair being a diminutive, small ones only. Now, dag daga shani to'em asu ben begedolim ben kiketem. If it says both words, dag and daga, then he will be prohibited from both the big ones and the small ones. That is a braita אמר לרב פאפא לאביי, ממאי דדג שאני טועם גדול הוא? תכתיב אמן השם דג גדול לבלוע את יונה. So he asked about this. How does Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar know that the word dag is referring to only a big fish? Well, look at Yonah. It says Hashem appointed a large fish to swallow Yonah. Obviously, it has to be quite large that Yonah could fit comfortably inside. And that says the word dag only. Hold on, that's not a good proof. Yonah prayed to Hashem from inside the daga, and you said daga is a small fish, but he's in the same fish, the same large fish, and yet it calls it daga. So this is a problem. It seems that dag and daga are used interchangeably here. Halakashia. No, we can answer this. Listen to this one. Dilma pilate dagadol ubelae dagkatan. Maybe first Yonah was in a big fish, and then he spit him out, and a small fish then swallowed him. Why would that be? Well, maybe the big fish was too comfortable, and Yonah's like, this is fantastic in here, right? I could stay in here all day. And so he wasn't praying. And so we had to downsize him so that he would be smushed, and then he would say, I gotta get out of here, and only then, Vayitpelel Yonah. Why did he pray? Oh, because he was in Me'eh Daga, in the small fish. All right, so we got out of that one. But not for long. Elav hadaga shel bayro meta, ketanim metu gedolim lo metu. In the Makkah of blood, it says that all the fish in the Nile died. Wait a second, only the small ones, because it says daga, and the big fish didn't die? They were totally fine, swimming in blood? That doesn't make sense. Ela daga mashma gedolim or mashma ketanim. Really, the word daga means big and small, and so these words are used interchangeably in the Tanakh. However, but if you go around and do a survey in our own time, in the time of the Tanaim, and you see people use the word dag to refer more to big fish and daga to small fish, and therefore for Nedarim we don't go by the biblical definitions, but rather by the common definitions in the time and place that you are. Okay, hanoder min ha-sachna. We mentioned in the Mishnah that we say sachana, this combination dish of large and pieces of fish. You're prohibited from all those pieces of fish and even the brine and the gravy. Amar leRavina lavashe, amar hare alai sichin, mai tiba'eh. What about the word sichin? Is sichin the same as sachna, or is this a slightly different word and means something different? Mai tiba. We leave this question unresolved like a teku. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen v'amen.